Another game we're talking about, starting to get to the night slate now. Number 10, Texas A&M at South Carolina, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. Story to know is, can Texas A&M avoid slipping up now that it controls its own destiny? Because with the win over LSU this past Saturday, Texas A&M now has sole possession of first place in the SEC. If the Aggies can win their remaining regular season games, they'll book a trip to Atlanta and also clinch a spot in the college football playoff as well. That won't be easy, especially considering what's on deck this weekend. Texas A&M travels to South Carolina, currently in the top 30 of PFF power rankings right now. The Aggies also must figure out who their quarterback's going to be after Marcel Reed last week was so good, provided a spark that ignited their offense in the victory. Connor Wigman struggled against LSU as well. Mike Elko still has been non-committal on who's going to be starting in this one against South Carolina. So it's going to be interesting. I believe Marcel Reed will be the guy, but we'll see. But they really just can't avoid slipping up here because right now they control their own destiny.
I think more gamesmanship when it comes to the quarterback situation because those two guys are so different. Very much like we talked about with Penn State earlier. You've got Connor Wigman, who's a more traditional pocket passer, and you've got Marcel Reed, who brings all the option stuff and the run game stuff. I'm with you. I think after what we saw and really what we've seen all year with the way Texas A&M has played through their run game, I think Marcel Reed is going to play, but I think there's some gamesmanship there on the part of Elko and just not giving away that part and making it just a tiny bit harder for South Carolina to game plan.
Definitely. So, Dawn, you have the A&M offense. So what should we be looking out for when they have the ball?
All right, so you've got a South Carolina defense that we know is elite in pass defense. I mean, they're elite all the way around, but they're a little bit softer against the run. It's been more up and down. They've had some really good games in run defense. They've had some shakier ones. I thought it was a big reason that they lost to LSU early in the year. They gave up some rushing yards, and LSU got some tempo stuff. And what you're seeing from South Carolina is it's inconsistent. Okay, they've got 3 different games where their run defense grade was under 63. Now I think they have 3 other games where it was over 80 and they were just dominant. But it's about getting between the tackles. Okay, and Texas A&M has really excelled this year when they run between the tackles. You're talking about a team between the tackles. They're 8th in rushing grade. They're 14th in run blocking grade. They're 15th in EPA per play. They use all, especially with Reed in there, they use all sorts of different looks. But at the end of the day, it comes down to Le'Veon Moss and Amari Daniels mashing teams between the tackles behind what's an offensive line that I think, especially in the run game, has played really well this season. That's kind of been the metric, the X factor in those games that I talked about where South Carolina has struggled. They don't struggle keeping contained because they got monsters on the edge. We know that. And they got good players inside too, but there is the big difference when South Carolina has struggled is they've struggled between the tackles. And when they excel between the tackles, then the rest of their run defense is fine because you can't really – they're so fast and they have so many athletes out on the edge and even at safety coming down in the alley and things like that where they don't lose on runs to the outside. If you're going to beat South Carolina, okay – I think there's 2 things you can do. You can run right at them, right between the tackles, which A&M does, and you can use tempo, which is not necessarily a thing A&M does with their run game. They want to slow things down a little bit. They're not a team that goes no huddle and really goes fast, although in this game, maybe they do. You get late in the season, you got to break some tendencies. I think at least that first part is going to be the crucial part to watch in this game is when you talk about South Carolina's defenders between the tackles, especially like Tonka Hemingway and TJ Sanders on the inside going against all these run schemes. And I think as far as the quarterback thing goes, I got to be honest with you. I think it's going to have to be Reed in this game.
Yeah, I think so.
It's going to between what we saw against LSU and I think just stylistically, if you play Wigman, a more traditional pocket passer, and try to center it around what's been a very inconsistent passing game, this is not the defense you want to do that with. If I'm Mike Elko, I need to run the ball as much as possible in this game. I do not want this South Carolina defense pinning their ears back, throwing into this secondary with some really good players. O'Donnell Fortune at corner and Nick Imanwori at safety and all. They have an elite pass defense. They have an above-average run defense. That's the part I'm attacking. I'm putting Reed in there. I'm running right at him, and we're just going to see where this thing goes on the ground.
Yeah, it makes sense to start Reed because of how good he was against LSU. It also makes sense because he said, like, this is a game where they're going to want to run the ball, and if you're going to want to run the ball, you want your best athlete at quarterback, which is Marcel Reed.
Yeah.
That one as well. My matchup to watch, though, when South Carolina has the ball is their offensive line against A&M's defensive line, because I think A&M has a clear advantage over them in that side when the Gamecocks have the ball. Just like last year, South Carolina's offensive line has struggled mightily this year. They currently have a 58.1 offensive line grade. That's 115th among FBS O-lines. South Carolina's given up a pressure on 42.3% of their dropbacks. At the third most in the Power 4 this year. Texas A&M's defensive line is 12th in PFF grade this year, and currently 3 Aggie defensive linemen are among the top 100 prospects in PFF's 2025 NFL Draft Big Board in Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, and Shamar Turner. Scorton, in particular, the number 1 edge defender on our big board right now. The Aggies are 7th in run defense grade and 31st in pass rushing grade this year. And making matters worse for South Carolina in this game is how much Lenora Sellers has struggled when he's under pressure. He has a 28.7 passing grade under pressure this year. That is 132nd among 141 qualifying quarterbacks. So Sellers has really struggled under pressure. South Carolina's offensive line has really struggled as well. And you're going up against an elite defensive line the Texas A&M's got.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's going to be the big thing. In South Carolina, realistically, they want to do the same thing A&M does now that A&M has Reed. Is they want to run the ball, they want to get in all their option stuff, right, and maybe occasionally they want to make a big play. And Sellers, we've seen, is capable of making big plays, but things have broken down for him under pressure. But no, it's going to be, I think it's going to come down to, that last part, especially where who's going to make more mistakes in this game. You got 2 really young quarterbacks playing, 2 very similar quarterbacks playing, at least in style. It's going to be, you get 2 really good defenses playing in this game, don't you? This is going to be a fun physical matchup. And let's be honest, I mean, I know South Carolina, they're not going to go to the playoff or anything, but that's a tough road environment to play right now. With that defense, that's going to be there. I know A&M, last week they had at least the comfort of Kyle Field. This is going to be some environment, I think, going into Columbia.
And just take a peek behind the curtain real quick. Don, in my top 25, if I extended it to 26 teams, South Carolina would have been number 26 for me. So this is a team that's right on the edge of being a top 25 team in the country. It's not an easy game for A&M, especially in that environment in Columbia, South Carolina at night as well. That crowd goes crazy at night. Ultimately, Dalton, will Texas A&M continue to control its own destiny and win this game, or will South Carolina pull it off?
The more I thought about this game, it was really hard to pick. Because I got to be honest with you, I think with Reed at quarterback for A&M, I think these 2 teams are exactly the same. Yeah. I do. I think they both have really good defenses, right? And A&M's defense is coming on lately. They both have really good run games when you talk about Sellers and Sanders for South Carolina, and you talk about what A&M has with Reed in the backs. Neither one of them right now is wicked comfortable throwing the ball, at least in the drop back situation. So I think they're incredibly similar. I think you have it, whereas last week against LSU, Texas A&M, it was so different, right? Yeah. It was LSU they need to drop back and throw the football, and they're kind of more athletic on defense. They don't play like these 2 teams play. So I think what it came down to for me is Marcel Reed. There's been a lot of pressure on Marcel Reed, right? The spots he's had to come in. He had to go into the swamp and beat Florida. He had to come into the second half last week and save their season, and he was great, right? I haven't seen yet. And I know they've played tight in some tight games, right? The LSU game, although he got hurt, Sellers got hurt just before the half in that game. The Alabama game was close, and he made some good throws. But I haven't seen Lenora Sellers break through in that big spot like I've seen Marcel Reed do it like he did last week, right? And I think that might just be the difference in a game where it could come down to whichever quarterback makes the big mistake. I think it's a physical defensive game. Both teams want to run the ball. Give me Texas A&M 24-20. I was this close, I'll be honest with you, picking South Carolina, and I'm probably going to regret not doing it because I think this game is a lot closer than some people would think on the surface.
You're not the only one on the fence right now, Dawn. In the chat, Are You Yeti said, I picked South Carolina initially, but I think I changed my mind, honestly. So there's a lot of people that are going back and forth in this game.
It's a much tighter game than the records would make you think because South Carolina, I mean, they got, a field goal loss to LSU and a 2-point loss to Bama. That's a good team with a really good defense. You have a defense that good, you can play with anybody.
I think this game is, depending on who you ask, this game is going to be hideous. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game.
Would it shock you if it was 10-7?
Yeah, it's going to be. I got 20-17. I got A&M beating South Carolina. I think it's going to be ugly with how good these 2 defenses are, and each side has their own offensive issues, especially in the passing game as well. I think A&M will barely squeak out a win on the road, and they move one step closer to the SEC title game with a win over South Carolina, but I would not be surprised if it goes the other way either, because I think South Carolina is a very, very good team. And like I said, they are right on the edge of being ranked for me in my top 25 right now.